The Sprint Retrospective is the final event of a sprint. It is the opportunity for the whole Scrum team to stop, pause, and inspect their processes. No one outside of the Scrum team attends this event because it is an internal look at how the Scrum team work together. It is focused at looking at how the last sprint went, with focus likely given to individuals, interactions, processes, and tools as needed. In simple terms, its purpose is to identify ways to improve the effectiveness of the Scrum team and increase the quality it delivers. In terms of its time box, for a 1 calendar month sprint, the time box for a sprint retrospective is 3 hours. However, if your sprint is shorter than 1 calendar month, then the time box typically shortens too. The Sprint Retrospective is a very powerful Scrum event. We talk a lot about this empirical feedback loop, and it's done as a process. It's designed to exercise empiricism. Whereas the review focuses on the increment and in the inspectable artifact, the retrospective is an opportunity for the Scrum team to take an internal look about how they work. It's their opportunity to openly and honestly consider how well the last sprint went, and where necessary, collaborate on ways to improve. Everyone interacts as peer team members, including the Scrum Master. There is no hierarchy in a sprint retrospective. The inputs to a successful sprint retrospective is the previous sprint itself, how it went, and how importantly the Scrum team lived the 5 values. Without the necessary culture to allow the improvement to be identified, a sprint retrospective can be a stale and formulaic affair. On a similar note, consider how this culture of openness may be impacted should there be managers external to the Scrum team present. It is harder to create transparency around areas of improvement for fear of being seen as incompetent when a manager is present. A Scrum Master will support the Scrum team with positive techniques for use in facilitating the sprint retrospective, whilst bearing in mind the necessity of supporting the 5 values. Another input to the sprint retrospective is any data that has been gathered during the previous sprint. Did we meet the sprint goal? What is that? What is the net promoter score? How is the morale currently holding up of the team? Data is powerful in the sprint retrospective because it depersonalizes areas of conflict and creates topics for discussion. The output of a successful sprint retrospective is simply that the Scrum team have a clear way to improve. Improvements don't need to be large. Even small-scale changes will compound over time. In fact, identifying smaller changes sometimes have a greater impact because the team materially have more control with implementing them. These improvements may even be added to the upcoming sprint backlog in order to be acted on. By adding them to the sprint backlog, the Scrum team makes it clear and transparent that they are committed to improving how they work. Although it's not mandatory, the commitment of the definition of done is an incredibly important talking point during the sprint retrospective. The definition of done, if you can remember that from the video, creates a common language of inspection. It demonstrates a commitment to quality in the form of the criteria it contains to the stakeholders. The continual tightening and refinement of the definition of done during the sprint retrospective is vital to iteratively and incrementally improving the product. It is important because without a consistently applied definition of done, the state of the product is unknown. When I was first starting out as a Scrum Master, I remember one of the best tips I was ever given. It was that it's far better for a Scrum team to consistently conform to a weak definition of done than for a Scrum team to consistently ignore a strong definition of done. The reason why this is true is because a weak definition of done will, over time, be improved. However, a Scrum team who have consistently ignored their strong definition of done will more than likely produce inconsistent and likely an unsupportable product. The takeaway from this topic on the sprint retrospective is that it is vital for the Scrum team to stop at the end of a sprint and look back. Looking back allows them to honestly and transparently inspect how they work with regards to individuals, interactions, processes, tools, and maybe their definition of done. Without taking this opportunity seriously, the Scrum team will likely either maintain how they currently work and never improve, or more likely form bad habits that without inspection and adaptation will bed in and consistently decrease the quality and value that they produce every sprint.